You're tuning into the Journey to Your Best Self podcast, where we explore the past holistic well-being, personal growth, and living a fulfilling life. Each episode, we bring you insightful conversations, practical tools, and inspiring stories to help you integrate your mind, body, and spirit on your journey to becoming your best self. Let's dive in and embark on this journey together. And welcome back to the Journey to Your Best Self podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian O'Neill, and I'm joined, as always, by my sister, Tara O'Neill, clinical hypnotherapist, certified life coach, and yoga instructor. Today, we're absolutely thrilled to introduce Jonathon Aslay to the show, one of America's leading midlife dating coaches and a true advocate for self-love and emotional health. Jonathon's journey into this work stems from a profound personal experience, including the heartbreaking loss of his son, which led him to explore the deeper dimensions of love, relationships, and self-discovery. As the author of What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway? And the host of a thriving YouTube channel, Jonathon combines practical advice with heartfelt wisdom to help people navigate relationships, dating, and personal growth. Today's episode will explore how relationships can have a profound and powerful effect on the path to self-love, the role of emotional health in fostering fulfilling connections, and the ways partners can either help or hinder your journey to your best self. Jonathon, without any further ado, welcome aboard.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate you. You modified my bio. I'd like to have a copy of that.
No, absolutely. And there's a lot more that certainly could be said, but we wanted to get right into it. How, to give the audience a little bit of background, how long have you been in this space? I know that you have quite the following, and you got a lot of imprints online that go back well over a decade. So can you give us a little bit of background,
Sure,
Cliff Notes version of where you're coming from and how long you've been around for?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So, I'll try to make this brief, but after turning 40 and going through a divorce about 15 plus years ago, I found myself back out in the dating marketplace, and there was this thing called online dating. And this was well before swipe apps, and you would plug in, like the parameters of what you're looking for, and someone would magically appear. And I remember I had a really nice first date with a really nice woman, but something wasn't right. And then a couple days later, I'd meet another woman, nice date, something wasn't right. And this happened again and again. And in 1 year, I had over 100 first dates.
Jesus.
And I realized the something wasn't right was me. I was the common denominator. So right about that time, the movie The Secret came out. I started to watch that, and I'm like, oh my God, that just resonated with me. But mostly in the area of working on myself. So I began consuming any book I could get my hands on regarding personal development, self-help, and spiritual work. And what was interesting was the online dating was also kind of an addiction for me. That's why I went out with 100 people. The addiction was I was actually communicating with people that I met through the internet, and we'd be sharing our stories about divorce and, raising children and the emotional effects that was going on. And I made a lot of friends in the process, not even actually physically going on dates, just communicating with lots of different people. And then what happened was one day I get a call. Jonathon, will you look at my dating profile and help me make it better? And I'm like, okay. So I said, do this, change this, do this. And then a month later, they go, I've got a date with this guy. Will you look at his profile and tell me what you think? And literally, that's how my business was born, was helping women, particularly give them advice on improving their profile, but then eventually giving them perspective on men, particularly divorced men, because I've been through, alimony, child support, visitation rights, all the other things that happen in midlife. And that's kind of how my business was birthed.
Wow. In a way, you kind of had the secret for them, or so they thought. And you did, behind the curtain, you were revealing something from being a man, as you were, right? That they maybe didn't have access to. So why do you still feel the same way about online dating? I don't know if you're talking about the Match.com, like eHarmony, like era, right? But now, it's even more prevalent and pronounced in society with millennials, right? And Gen Z and things like that. Do you think that it still is as pure and kind of beneficial as it was, or is it's better than it was when it was first kind of incubating in the early 2000s? Can you talk about the evolution of, face to face meeting somebody at work, then the early online years to now, Tinder or even post Tinder?
Yeah. This is a great question. And I'll be candid with you. I have a love-hate relationship with online dating. And let's call it online meeting because you're not actually dating, you're meeting people through this
Okay.
venue. Right now, 65% of all couples who are meeting today connect through an online connection, whether it's
Wow.
dating sites, swipe apps, or even social media. That's where
Hmm.
most people are meeting. And those previously, 40 years ago, it was at school, it was at church, it was through family and friends, it was through, did I mention work? Even bars, were like
Hmm.
one big predominant places to meet.
Sure. Sure.
And all of those places I just mentioned, each one of them represents about 5% or less of where people are meeting today. So, and I think it's because partly we tend to live more siloed lives, particularly as we get older. And my demographic that I speak to is the midlife demographic, which I say is after baby making years and before retirement. So, for this demographic, we're not physically out meeting people to be seen, to be even asked out on a date or to ask someone on a date. So, online is the predominant place. The problem is, and you mentioned it earlier, when we shifted to swipe apps, when we do use our phones, it's actually marginalized people to just literally a 1 second swipe right or swipe left. Whereas when I entered into the dating marketplace with online dating, you used your laptop, you used your desktop. There was more robust information there. You engaged a little bit longer than a quick, let's, swipe and then connect.
Absolutely. Tara, go ahead.
Yeah, so thanks so much, Jonathan. This work is much needed. I think we have to adapt to the times. So let's start out with the positives of online dating, right? So we hear so much about, how social media and online dating, all these horror stories or all these challenges. But can you highlight some of the wonderful things that it's actually doing and how it's bringing people together, and that once you
Sure.
understand it a bit more, it actually can be a way to find really, joy, happiness, love?
Yeah, no, this is a great question. And the reality is, online dating is a great portal for connecting with people. And what I mean to say, people you wouldn't otherwise meet in your daily life. Yesterday on my YouTube channel, I interviewed a couple who met on Bumble at the beginning of the pandemic. They moved in together 2 years later and they got married this year. And, people will say to you, online dating is all the leftovers, but you know what? A big percentage of people are using this, so it is a good medium. The problem, and if I can kind of turn it around,
Mhm.
it's an excellent medium for people who are intentional. In other words, they put together quality photographs, they write a quality bio about themselves. And when I say quality, I know most people aren't, you know, savvy enough to do this, but there are plenty of, inexpensive organizations that can help you do this. And by the way, you can go to Groupon and get a photographer to take a bunch of great photographs of yourself. So it's not like there isn't, you know, the potential is there. It's the effort that people put into it that creates most of the problems.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess also too, when we look at other pros for it, I find that it can be helpful in getting people helping their self-love, helping them be more confident, helping them understand and explore maybe different types of, like you said, people might have not otherwise interacted in this way. So if they use it as a learning tool, maybe, and a portal. I don't know if you use the word portal, but like opening different portals,
Yeah.
and so we can invite in different energies. So maybe that will lead us into the law of attraction and the working on ourselves and how we are attracting maybe at the level of our self-worth. And I know that might be kind of broad, so take it where you will, and incorporate it into how you, what would you do if a 50-year-old woman came to you and said, I've never been online, I don't think this is for me, I want to meet somebody, but it's just a scary world out there. It hasn't done much personal
Sure.
growth work. where would you tell them to start?
It's interesting. As you began sharing this question, I was thinking of a TikTok video I recently watched where a comedian was talking about the old fashioned way of meeting women. And you had to walk up to a total stranger and ask them for their number. And we had to learn rejection over and over and over again as a man, which built up our confidence to get accustomed to rejection. And in one sense, there's an element of learning to love yourself in through that process of pain. In fact, many cases, how we achieve a level of personal growth is through the pain that we've experienced, because it's an opportunity to grow, to learn about oneself, and also look at the positive implications that come from it. To that person who's scared, I recognize that fear. And so just like getting dressed up to go out to dinner, well, then, get dressed up and take some really good photographs of yourself. You can hand your smartphone to a friend of yours and just take some good quality photographs. And I know a lot of people struggle with that, but I learned a really simple secret for creating a great photograph, and that's to chuckle when that person's about to take a picture, just like you are right now. You're chuckling. And if I took a snapshot of that, it demonstrates energy. It demonstrates radiance. It demonstrates something inside of you. And a lot of people are afraid. So make it a fun game to take some really good quality photographs. And as I said earlier, there are organizations that can write an easy bio for you for about $100. And it would require a little bit of investment for oneself, but quality effort generates much better results.
Definitely. That's wonderful.
Yeah. Is there something? So we're a social creature, right? And there has to be something to be said for connecting with people in the classic or old school traditional way, though, right? I do feel like when you have to curate yourself online, you do toe dangerously close to being disingenuous, right? If you're filtering, if you're photoshopping, if you're, man, I've been doing this for years, right? Oh, how much money you make? Well, how many, tens of thousands should I add to that when I'm trying to impress somebody, right? Or as far as, completely fabricating a career, right? So there's a lot of things that are done to make yourself look good. But when you're really being disingenuous and then you actually have to go and meet somebody and then they learn about you, it's hard to recover from that, right? This was just my online persona. And now you get to know so you're kind of starting almost with one hand tied behind your back. Is there anything to be said for the traditional way people used to meet now post pandemic? Is that just dead? Is that gone with people working from home more now and like you said, being so siloed and not interacting? Or is there still kind of a presence, depending maybe geographically, where people live and hope for that kind of traditional courtship and interaction?
So this is a great question. And I mean, if we look throughout history of human pair bonding and mating, we pretty much mated within the tribe we lived in, literally within the geographic tribe that we lived in, whether it was your tribe, your village, your town, that's whom you, and because of that, there was no degrees of separation. You always knew, or were, probably 1 degree of separation. You knew somebody that knew them. So they weren't a total stranger. As you started to ask this question, I was thinking about my father, who was, he just passed away. He's 99 years old.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
No, that's okay. I'm saying it with a lot of pride. He lived to be 99, so I'm actually
amazing.
Yahoo for him. But 9 years ago, he had to learn to adapt to a world that if you wanted to do banking, you needed to have a smartphone. You need to send a text message. You had to send code. And at 90 years old, he adapted to our environment, because going inside a bank, kind of now is like, it's almost past tense in our world that he grew up in. So he had to learn to adapt. And whether we like it or not, if you want to connect with people, you have to be seen. And maybe college students certainly are in an environment where you're surrounded by single eligible people. And it's getting a little bit tougher to connect with people in our work environment, partially because people change jobs all the time, or like you said, a lot of people work from home. Maybe still going to church is a place to connect with people. family and friends, it's becoming more difficult. I know when I've gotten fixed up by friends, I'm like, do you know who I am? And I say that a little tongue in cheek.
Mm.
So I think embracing this rather than resisting it would be a better choice. And I know it's not the most favorable choice, but it's something we have to learn, just like we had to learn how to use a keyboard. And today we most of us need a computer to survive. And in that same vein, I'm here to suggest that we can resist it or we can embrace it. And if we embrace it, we have a greater chance for success.
Yeah, that's
Love it. Absolutely.
so. As you know, people are mirrors of one another. And how can relationships help this process? But also, when we talk about doing inner work, what does that mean for someone that has not ever done any self-reflection work? And how can a couple do it together, so it doesn't have to be like, all right, well, I have to fix everything, I have to heal everything, and then
Yeah.
or be perfect before they find that someone perfect, and then they have to find the perfect person, or there's these things of red flags, and I don't want this because of this, and so you had said something I loved in one of your videos about, like, red flags are, we have to accept that there's an element of dysfunction or unhealthiness, in our culture, just
Yeah.
part of the trauma of being a human. So can you speak a little bit to when we talk about self-love or doing inner work,
Sure.
and then meeting someone, and what element do we have to be healed before we meet someone, so to speak?
So this is a great question. And you talked about self-reflection, self-awareness. And to some degree, if you're an individual who doesn't feel, I'll just say, joy or contentment, in other words, and I don't mean that you're happy singing, all day long kind of thing, but a sense of contentment, a sense of joy, then there's most likely a pain going on. And that pain requires some attention. And we're talking about emotional pain. And I've observed that dating and relationships trigger the number one emotional health wound I believe most people are suffering from. And that is, I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable. I'm not likable. That's like the core deep wounds most people feel. And I mean, we can talk about abandonment and certainly genuine abuse that might have happened in someone's life. But recognizing that, I think if you've been on the planet a while now and you have a smartphone, there's about a gazillion TikTok videos telling you what's wrong with you. So, and I say this a little tongue in cheek, but that there is a need for personal development, self-help, spiritual work, and therapy to actually create emotional scaffolding to be able to weather the emotional storms that can happen. And nothing triggers those storms like being in relationship. And I like what Esther Perel says, I might butcher this a little bit, but she says the quality of our life is going to be predicated by the quality of relationships we have. And it starts with the relationship with self, hence self-love. And self-love isn't manicures and pedicures. I mean, that's self-care. Self-love is self-worth, self-confidence, self-reliance, self-esteem. And just so for the record for everyone, it's a place we never fully achieve. It's a work in progress, I believe. And the people that invest in their emotional well-being tend to have lives that are a little bit more joyful and content than those that are kind of burying their head in the sand on working on themselves.
Yeah, no, I love that's so well said. When you were explaining that, I was visualizing like a force field that people are growing when they do some of the inner work and their self-love work. And then if something happens in a relationship or the dating scene, kind of can bounce off a little bit more easily, and it doesn't take them down.
Yeah. Well, and also, and just to piggyback on something I said, and I know this sounds a little crass, but I believe every human being is dysfunctional on some level, some more than others, and some have genuine traumas that truly need healing, whether it's a childhood wound or an adult trauma. Even divorce is an emotionally traumatic event. And so I think we're being called from a societal and human perspective to actually work on our stuff. I think we're blessed to some degree that we don't have to, at least here in the United States, worry about war or even a roof over our head to some degree. And I think it's given our society an opportunity to go, hey, maybe the real work is the inner journey to find that space of joy and contentment. And it doesn't have to be in a relationship either. You know, that's kind of the fallacy that a relationship will make us whole. And I know studies say that people live longer in relationship, but that's going to radically change because the single population in the future is going to outnumber the married population. That is going to happen because humans don't know how to partner very well with one another on an emotional level. Our old way of partnering was based on necessity. Women were radically dependent upon men for survival. And thankfully, that's changed. But it's also created a change of how human pair bonding needs to be addressed differently than the old-fashioned way of doing things.
Wow, yeah, that's good stuff. And I do really have a lot of questions because I like how you hold on to some really timeless truths and you mix in some evolutionary biology and there's societal changes at play. There's definitely a lot going on there. One of the things that I was thinking about is when you want to connect with somebody online, and ideally, while blind dates can turn out well, you want as much information about that person, to increase the chances of success. So if you're someone that's working on self-love and you're trying to do the inner work and, like you had said, really build up, and reflect, and you're reaching a more mature stage in life, what are the tells or cues you can get to find out if the person that you're pursuing or trying to connect with is doing the same thing? Because one would think that it would be advantageous to have a partnership with someone who cared about such things as well. So is there any way that you can find out if someone is also into self-improvement and going on a personal journey of self-improvement, mind, body, and spirit, like we like to promote here? Is there a way that you can sense them? They might not have self-improving on their profile. So how do we find out so we can find someone that kind of has the values that we do?
I think this is a great question, Brian, and this is going to be really, really, really hard to do, but you just ask. Okay. I mean, and here's the thing. I think we've been indoctrinated in the belief that romance and chemistry equals relationship success. So in many ways, men are taught to romance a woman, basically to get in their pants. Let's get real. But most important, women feel valued when they've been romanced. And I always say, reserve romance for couples in a relationship, not as an entry point in relationship. And I'm an advocate for radical honesty in the very first communication. I know this goes against everybody else's advice. But if everyone else's advice is so great, why are people miserable in the dating marketplace? If this was so great that we play this game and we use this romance game to connect with people. Look at, if two people have connected through an online dating medium, supposedly they're both supposedly intentional about a relationship. And if you're intentional about a relationship, then ask. I mean, and by the way, not by choice, I'm back in the dating marketplace. I was in a significant relationship with someone I deeply cared for, but it wasn't the right relationship for her. So she moved on a year and a half ago, and I'm back in the dating marketplace. And my first question is always, or not first question, but usually after one or two quick rapport building, exchanges, I'm like, look, personal development, self-help, spiritual work are radically important to me. It's a big facet of my life. And I'm seeking someone who wants to join me in this realm. Is that you? Yes or no? Because if it's a no, we don't need to continue communicating. I'm just not interested. Why are we so afraid of asking some really important questions? I'm not even going to call them deep or vulnerable. It's just questions of alignment. And people are so afraid. But if you push past that fear and say, this is for your benefit, when you connect, by the way, I have a quote in my book. First, chapter 1 in my book says, Speak your truth, do it with kindness. So always speak your truth, just do it kindly. But chapter 9 says, if it's sincere and from the heart, you can't say the wrong thing to the right person. The right person is going to go, you're singing you're vibrating on the same level with me. Let's go deeper.
I like that. You can't say the wrong thing to the right person.
Yeah.
And just logistically, it's going to save a lot of time, right? When you don't,
Heck yeah.
you don't need 6 months down the line. Oh, by the way, I don't like anything about you. Oh, me neither. So yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about the logistics of it. So when somebody is meeting online, or even if they meet in person or they're connected, what is there a protocol of where to go, what to do, how to show up? Can we take away like some of the cut and dry, like you got to do A, B, C, D, E, and just can you give some tips or pointers of
Sure.
that first encounter? You've had a lot of practice.
So,
you had 100 of them.
yeah, well, no, I've had a lot more since then. Interactions. So first, you have to think about it from a geographic perspective, because nowadays you can swipe with someone who lives 100 miles away. Oftentimes it's not someone in your immediate backyard. So when someone is in your immediate backyard, I would say have a few exchanges, maybe do a FaceTime, and meet as soon as possible to see if there is some sort of energetic chemistry. And I say energetic chemistry because it doesn't have to always be absolute physical or sexual chemistry, but just some level of energetic chemistry. When you do have some distance involved, this is where it gets radically tricky, because oftentimes today, people will engage in incessant text communication. And because there are a lot of lonely, wounded, emotionally wounded people out there. And remember I told you about the 100, like all that communicating I was doing in the beginning? I didn't realize it, but I was a broken person, desperate for attention and and connection. And this was a great medium to do this. And I was doing it all across the country, communicating with people. I say if you're genuinely serious and intentional, after a couple exchanges via text messaging, maybe 1 or 2 phone calls, and then definitely do a FaceTime or video chat to determine if they're real. I can't tell you how many times I've spoken to women in particular who have spent 6 months in nothing but a text conversation with somebody, and it had distance involved, hoping they would connect, and then it didn't materialize. Or it turned into a scam artist who wanted to extort money. So I would say a couple exchanges via text, maybe a phone call or 2, and then immediately a video chat before planning to meet in person, excuse me. And then if there is distance involved, this does make it a little more complicated. And this is where that exchange might be centered around, well, how are we going to make this work if we like each other? Women, sadly, oftentimes will pretzel themselves for a man. They oftentimes will abandon themselves for a relationship, which I don't think is a healthy way of approaching things, because if you uproot your life somewhere to go be in someone else's life, you're putting a lot of dependency on that relationship to fulfill a lot of other needs that happen within your own geographic circle. Just even figuring out where to get your hair done might be a big deal. And I'm being tongue in cheek about that. So I would say approach the process intentionally and be aware that the sooner 2 people connect, the sooner you can get to the bottom. First off, asking those, more important questions, but then connect as soon as possible to see if this relationship has any legs.
That's great. While we're on the advice, I mean, you've just been given advice out left and right. That's really useful. I want to go back to how I said I respected kind of how you tied in so much the, evolutionary biology thing, the dating trends and changes over the years. A lot of it is, the more things change, the more things, stay the same, as they say. And I think that, our biology is something that is going to take, generations and generations and millennia to change significantly. So if we can go back to ever since, right? Things so now it's 2024, but you've been doing this for a long time. And if you think about since relationshipconfidant.com and like way back,
God,
Mr.
that's really going back.
Yes.
I don't even know what that is.
So
It was my first
the
website and I scrapped it right away.
Okay, sorry. I wasn't given the notes.
So a lot has changed in society since then. And watched one of your older interviews and talking to a young lady who was kind of a relationship expert in her own right. You talk about the differences between men and women, and men have always traditionally been more primal and in the pursuit part of this cat and mouse game. And there's been more of a lust and like an aggressive nature to us because with testosterone and hormones and things, many are built of us are built. And that's just the way we've been doing things for generations.
Yeah.
But now there seems to be, I'm not judging the positive or negative, turn of this, but society is kind of constraining men a little bit, trying to get them to adapt to maybe a new way of approaching the fair sex and dating and relationship start, and how we meet people, how we talk to people, what you can and can't do in new relationships and when meeting people, especially, with younger generations. A lot has changed, compared to, 50s, 60s, 70s, the 80s, the 90s, even the 2000s. So that being said, what guidance do you have for men out there that are kind of trapped between what's their body and mind might be telling them and what some in society or some certain societies or maybe classes in society, social classes, are telling them to do? How do you balance that out? It can be a tricky situation
Sure.
for men out there. Do you have any guidance? Do you think that stuff is a little bit overblown? Trust their instincts, or is there a little bit of a warning that you give to men? It's 2024. You have to, act a certain way now. I know that was a broad, big
No,
question,
this is a
but
great question.
I
I
think
could
it's
spend,
important to go.
and
We try to look out for at your one self and journey to your best self, the guys out there. And I think this is something that you think could be helpful to them.
So I love this question. I could do 5 different separate episodes just on what you just shared. I want to say that I tend to work with women. I'm a gigantic advocate for women's empowerment. I'm equally an advocate for individual empowerment, no matter what your gender is. So I'm a big advocate for individual empowerment. One of the areas that I hyper focus on is the recognition that we all have childhood wounds and adult traumas that need healing, that need some level of work. And that's my first place to start, is to encourage self-awareness, which is the recognition of our fears, our insecurities, our judgments, our negative patterns, our limiting beliefs, how our actions can affect another human being. And I'm going to repeat that: how our actions can affect another human being. So when I'm speaking to a man, or a woman, I'm here to say that our self-centric approach to relationships oftentimes is, what can I get, instead of operating from a place of what can I give. And so creating that awareness is what I advocate for men and women alike. In particular, I advocate for understanding compatibility, meaning understand who you are and understand who would be compatible with you. Because unlike hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, when we made it in our own, tribe, we made it in our own race, our own culture, all these things, our own, similar religions and everything. Now with a melting pot, compatibility is a much more confusing question for a lot of people. So get some clarity on who really can fit into your life. In other words, know what your values are and understand your lifestyle. But the trickiest question in what you just shared is emotional maturity. And sadly, a lot of dating rhetoric is hyper-focused on our basic needs, our cave person needs, provider, protector, nurturer, gatherer, hormones and pheromones and our biology. And it's hyper-focused on that. And what isn't discussed is our our social, and also socialization is discussed. Those three things, our instinct, our biology, and socialization. What's not really discussed is our imprinting, what we were imprinted as children from our parents. Coming back to that, what I said earlier about childhood wounds. And I'm not talking about, real significant trauma or abuse. I grew up with middle class parents, and I had tons of mixed messaging growing up. I got bullied as a kid in school. I mean, there's all different types of wounding that doesn't have to be like, abuse per se. Also, I mentioned cultural and religious, or I didn't mention this, but I'm going to add this. How we were raised culturally and religiously can play into how we operate in the dating realm. But most importantly, I'm here to encourage everyone to recognize that if you want to show up as a sovereign being in a relationship, a real, I'm going to say quality person, but I don't like that word quality, but just a person that really genuinely cares about someone else. Just like when you're on the airplane and the flight attendant says, in the case of cabin pressure change, oxygen mask will drop. And if you're traveling with small children, put the oxygen mask on yourself first. We start with self. I mean, your whole podcast is centered around your best self and operating from your best self, because then you can give your best self to someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. So well said. You're so articulate, and I understand. Definitely YouTube is your medium for sure. So yeah, listeners, definitely go to his YouTube. I binge on your shorts, so thank you for providing me with the delightful knowledge, and it's quite comical too. You like I said, you have a knack for being on the video. You mentioned in one of them, Attached. I think that's an amazing book. It's a great place for people to start, just learning about who they are. If you were raised in a traditional, socialized, Western, culture, you need to read the book Attached. But is there another book that you'd recommend to people to read in terms of, self-love, aside from your book, Self-Love? That maybe was really important for you on your path? It could be like The Secret, it could be something personal growth, could be relationship. Just a book you could throw out to our listeners.
Oh, it's kind of interesting you brought this up, because just really quickly I want to share, my 28-year-old son came to me today with a relationship issue, and there's periods of time where he comes and asks for my advice, and there's times he doesn't. But we were really unpacking this particular circumstance that happened for him, this experience. And I discussed attachment style with him really for the first time. And by the way, my son edits my videos, so he listens to a lot of my stuff, but now he's getting firsthand. We talked about attachment and how he, and we talked about his relationship with his mother. And it was like all of a sudden the light bulb went off on his head. So whether you read the book Attached by Amir Levine or Rachel Heller, or the book Wired for Love by Dr. Stan Tatkin, there's another book called Learning Love by Thais Gibson. These are great books to understand attachment style. By the way, Tara, I'm going to recommend a completely different book that relates to your question, but I think it's important to mention another relationship book, and that book is called Getting the Love You Want by Harvell Hendricks and Helen Hunt. Getting the Love You Want. Why this is such an important book to read is you will learn about something known as the imago. And what that is really about is understanding how we choose partners that are similar to one or both of our parents. And so when my son had this aha moment when I was talking about his mother, he's like, oh my God, every woman I've ever dated has been my mom. Like we were having this real in-depth processing. And I knew this, but I was waiting for him to come to me and talk to me about it. So learning about our patterning, how we choose people, because we have grown up in such a fantasy that we're just supposed to meet the one and live happily ever after. And even in my own life, my mother and father only had each other for 66 years. I mean, they didn't have multiple relationships. that's a thing of the past. I mean, sadly, I mean, or it's a rarity. Let me just say. Um, the book that I think changed my life, the book that made the greatest impact on me, that had nothing to do with dating, mating, or relating, was the book Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. That book is like my Bible. And I want to add one additional book, and there's something I want to say about Untethered Soul, but additional book that made a huge impact was Return to Love by Marianne Williamson. Those two books in particular for me have been life-changing. I'm going to tell your audience something. If you purchase The Untethered Soul, whether you do audio or read it, here's your instructions. You're not allowed to read more than one chapter at any sitting. And quite frankly, you could read 3 pages and go, holy shit, I'm overwhelmed. It is very deep. This is the Marianas Trenches of deep understanding of oneself. And it's really learning how to talk to the voices in your head, the way I've interpreted it. But I make this recommendation because you might have to read it several times, but everybody I've ever recommended said thank you to me. This is a game changer.
It's a life changer. And actually, I'm listening religiously to the Michael Singer podcast. I don't know if you've listened to that one, but
yes.
I listened to seasons 1 and 2 a couple years back, and yeah, so now he's been popping up, and yeah, there you could listen to them on repeat. But yes, the Untethered Soul, like I would also say, it's okay if it doesn't make any sense the first time you listen to it.
Yeah,
that's okay. just keep going through it. So that's great advice. Yeah. Excellent, amazing. And yeah, this Return to Love. That's a great one too. And the Attached and yeah, and thank you so much for those. Brian also has a question that
yeah, I do. Sure. I do have a couple in as we wind down. You talked personally about some relationships that started and then for one reason or another ended, and then we had also talked several times about traumas, maybe minor to some, but traumas and things people have gone through in their lives. When you're in a relationship that's a complex and a deep, connected relationship, there's a lot that that person contributes to your mind, body, and spirit, the Yost triad that we always talk about. This is a tough question. I already know before I even ask it. How do you leave that relationship without this kind of negating all the benefits that you have accrued over the life of the relationship? Do you recommend some way of ripping the Band-Aid right off, or I mean, it seems dire and kind of fatalistic to say all relationships are going to end, but most will, right? So, how do we kind of keep the great parts of the relationships and not have the negativity of them splitting up? I guess it's breakup kind of advice. What I'm looking for, right? So,
yeah.
Is there something that you tell people when they're coming to you and then you've worked with them, they have something good going on, and then they're just devastated or so angry or so, why did I waste my time with this person? How can we kind of hold on to all the great things that happen in that relationship and not let the negative fresh wounds overtake them and cancel them out?
This is such a complex question. I have a client who's kind of in that same place, and it's a man, and he's like struggling because he cares for this person, but it's not the right relationship. And I shared with them some advice I heard before. When you're faced with two choices, until it becomes one choice, you just stay in a place of neutrality. In other words, until one choice comes, well above the second choice. And for this space, it's just being in a space of neutrality for this person at this moment in time until that significant choice rises, rises to the top. I think if a relationship isn't working, first off, hopefully you've had significant amount of conversations to talk about how to make it work. I mean, hopefully you've even seen a therapist, you've done everything to exhaust every opportunity to make it work. So if you've done that and the choice is to move on, every relationship that ends is a death of sorts. So it's going to need the grieving process that, we've talked about when physical death occurs. And whether you go through the multiple different layers of grieving, I think it's important to go through that. What I invite clients to do to get some level of closure is to ask themselves, what positive things about myself did I learn in this relationship? What positive things about myself? The second question, if you have any understanding of attachment theory or imago, is ask yourself, how have I healed from this relationship? How has this relationship been a healing for my own, inner, journey, if you will? The third question is, write down all the good things about the relationship. I mean, there should have been some real value in this relationship that's really good. And then wrap it up with gratitude. Be grateful for the experience. We oftentimes flog ourselves over these experiences instead of really reaching into one of the most powerful, forces in the universe is appreciation and gratitude. I mean, it's such a powerful force that can help uplift a person. Now, I want to repeat, you have to go through the grieving process. And if that means you have to curse that person out to a pillow or a punching bag or whatever it is, get all of that energy out, through emotional release work, somatic therapy, because that is an important part of the process. But when you're reflecting, here's the challenge. Most people, they focus on the negative. They focus on what's wrong. They focus on what they've done wrong. They've hyper-focused on all the things that keep one emotionally stifled. When we can reach into the gratitude bag and appreciation and at least have some semblance of care for the other person, I don't think that will bleed into any future. Well, we all have residue, but it won't bleed into a future relationship, because if you're bleeding from a past relationship and you carry that forward, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results.
That's all. That's awesome. As the audience knows, I usually love to ask one question. What's a negotiable thing that Jonathon Aslay needs to do? What's one secret tip, technique our audience can do to continue on their journey of self-discovery? But I wanted to turn it around a little bit, since we're talking about relationships and partners. What is one thing that someone listening that's in a relationship, they got a good vibe going, they have a good connection going?
Yeah.
What's one thing that you recommend that they should do every day, every a couple of days a week, every single week, to keep strengthening those bonds, to keep strengthening those strands, so that cable of connection gets fortified?
Yes, I love this question. First off, I want to add it kind of on a big picture perspective. I think every couple should be, by the way, if you're happy, it doesn't matter, you don't have to be, in a contentious relationship, but I invite personal development, self-help, spiritual work, or therapy as a regular practice in your relationship, and even going to a couples therapist when things are going good, and to strengthen your communication skills, to really help each other get to know one another, and use a third party to actually help, because they're good at pulling out of things inside of you that might be difficult for you. And this practice of doing this, or maybe it's a group program, I belong to several couples groups over the years, helps develop that muscle of communication. That would be that big picture. I think on a daily basis, I can't begin to stress the importance of expressing gratitude in your relationship, and make it a daily practice. Maybe it's a few minutes before you go to bed, or a few minutes in the morning. I mean, 3 simple things you're grateful for, but really come from the heart, and not just a bunch of platitudes or thank yous in life, but really sit with, what are you most grateful for about this person in your life? Because as you shared in my bio, I lost a child. Like in a second, he was gone. And that's how fast things can change in your life. There is no permanence. And so learning to appreciate the people that are in your lives is, at least in my mind, hyper important. And so that's the way I treat my friends, my family, and people that I'm getting to know, as coming from that place of gratitude.
Excellent. All your answers have been just so succinct yet also profound. So much great stuff here for our viewers and listeners. Where can people find out? And I know they're going to be looking. Where can people find out more about Jonathon Aslay and what you offer? Where are the best socials, the website to track you down online, and you let them know what they'll find when they get there?
It's real simple. My name is listed here, Jonathon Aslay. Just cut and paste that into Google, or actually cut and paste it into YouTube. My YouTube channel will come up. I produce 4 live videos a week, along with shorts every day and some pre-recorded videos. I'm a junkie for it. I'm a junkie for personal development, self-help, spirituality. I feel like I'm the Pied Piper out there screaming, to some degree, and I will yell a lot in my videos to encourage individuals to do work. So just type in my name into Google, and then you'll find me on social media and all those places if you're interested.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This has been so much fun, so much knowledge, and we hopefully will have you back and look forward to connecting more. Thank you so much for everything that you do and helping people every day. And we appreciate you, and we are grateful for you.
Well, thank you. You're both great interviewers. So this was a lot of fun for me. So I appreciate the pulpit to be able to share.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Pleasure meeting you.
Likewise.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Journey to Your Best Self podcast. We appreciate you being part of this community. For more resources, insights, and ways to connect, head over to youroneself.com. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, including Apple, Spotify, and Overcast. Your support means the world to us. Until next time, keep aligning your mind, body, and spirit, and peace, love, and self-discovery. Thank you.